There we go.
Welcome back to Who We Are and What We Need.
Hi.
I'm your host, Catherine Quiring, and I have with me today my co-host from the other podcast I'm on, Katherine Spearing. Yes, we rhyme.
Woo.
And I'm going to go ahead and let Katherine introduce herself a little bit, and then we're going to jump into the conversation we started having before we were taping and kind of
Love
get you caught up
it.
on that. So, Katherine,
Okay.
tell everybody in the Who We Are, What We Need podcast zone, who you are, like
Who
what you're
I am
passionate
and what I
about,
need.
what you do, what you need.
I love the name of your podcast, by the
Thank
way.
you.
And I feel like I say that to myself, like, who am I? What do I need in
Yeah,
situations of like, okay,
absolutely.
high activation, dysregulation? I just ask myself that question. And also, do you have one of these acupuncture rings? Have you heard of
No.
these? My
Yes.
improv coach gave it to me. All of my clients are virtual, and so I just have it on my hand and I just like roll it up and down, and it's really grounding. It's really relaxing. So
That's so
they're like
great. So
$3
actually, I've been
on Amazon.
trying to figure out how to unmask as a therapist more and like provide neurosensory space in my own space.
Sure.
That's like the clients are still going
Yeah.
to feel like I'm really connecting and caring about them, right? But like that I don't have to
Yeah.
keep looking at them the whole time. That I can like have
Yes.
more sensory things for
Yeah.
myself to feel
Absolutely.
less stress or energy output. Yeah,
In-person meetings, would you feel
in
comfortable
person.
doing this? Like, do you
Oh
meet in
yeah, in
person?
person I already like I have my little sensory things I like
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah,
do.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, this has
but
been
that's
super
just it's still
helpful.
yeah.
Yeah, I had a stress ball before
Yeah.
this, but this
I
is
have a
more grounding for me, or
I have a
I
really
have
nice
found it.
pillow I just got too.
Ooh.
It was going to go on the client couch, but it sits with
You're
me
like,
because it's
"No,
just
it's
so
just
snuggly.
mine."
It's
And I love
mine.
the
I sit and
eye
hold
on
it.
it.
I know it has an eye on it.
Yes.
I feel like we're
I
gonna have
love
to put
it.
this whole video on YouTube
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah.
because
At least
so
this
everybody
part
can
for
see what we're talking
sure.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't
This is
usually
a
because of my neurodiversity and that like right now I'm looking around when I think. And
Mhm.
so I was like, that could be a problem
Yeah, yeah,
for,
yeah.
you know, people watching, but we'll see how it
Focusing. Sure,
goes.
sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Cool. Anyway, my name's Katherine Spearing, and I run a nonprofit called Tears of Eden, which is for survivors of spiritual abuse who have come out of Christian, evangelical spaces, fundamentalist spaces. I also am a trauma recovery practitioner who works with that same demographic one on one, a little bit broader than just spiritual abuse recoveries, trauma recovery, just kind of more general trauma recovery in general. And then I also have a day job and I am a writer. I have one fiction uh, book out, and then I have a book on spiritual abuse coming out in 2025. And then I really hope to go back to writing fiction after that. So I would love for my
Super
tagline to
exciting.
be a mental health professional who writes fiction. Like, I kind of want that to
Yes.
be my brand,
I
is
love
kind of what
that.
I'm
Okay, well, I'm
thinking
going to
right
write it
now.
down because that's going to be your title. A mental health
Nice. I
professional who
love
writes
it.
fiction.
We're manifesting that
Great.
title. And I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so before we got off on that little nice rabbit trail, we were talking about how
Friendship
hard it can be
breakups.
to yeah, friendship breakups and how hard it can be to maintain friendships across the in evangelicalism or fundamentalism and deconstruction or post-Christian or adjacent Christian
Mm,
spaces because of the inherent part of the culture and conditioning that says if this person is not presenting as the same type of Christian you are, you must see them as a project,
yes,
right? Which is just so
absolutely.
hard.
It's so painful. And it's in my most recent experience that we were talking about, of just kind of coming to the end of a long event, inevitably was going to end in a friendship breakup, but I didn't know that, of like
Right.
what's been happening the past couple years, of just like this reality of like this certain belief system while I was growing in being able to extend this friend a space to have their own beliefs as I was growing out of fundamentalism, that this person was still in fundamentalism, and the fundamentals of this fundamentalism is that they can't interact with you as a safe,
Right.
healthy person if you don't believe what
And
they believe.
feel like they have enough safety within their framework of like closeness to
Yeah.
God, right? That they would be jeopardizing that to accept you unconditionally. Like that is part of the
Yeah.
framework, right? Which is just so
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah, and I had sent, like, the text exchange that was kind of like the final end of this friendship, which was incredibly painful. The whole journey has been painful. I feel closure now because I think I've just been
Mhm.
grieving the past couple years, kind of my body kind of knew it was gonna end,
Right.
I think, but then did it? I don't know. I felt caught off guard by some things, but I was emailing the exchange with my therapist, and my therapist was just like, "It is so bizarre to me that she seems to be taking personal offense to the fact that your faith has shifted."
Yep.
And I was like, "Yes, but it's also par for the course. Like
Right.
that
Right.
is it. I was in
Right.
it. I was in that
Right.
world. Like,
Right.
if you believe what I believe, we can be friends. If you don't, then I
Right.
must save you in
Right.
some way."
And
And
we have to keep signaling to each other within that when we're both in it that we're both still dedicated. Like you have to use the right words, you have to say the right prayers, you have to pray for each other, you have to hold each other accountable, you have to do all of the things that they teach you to do to signal that you're still in that
Mhm.
and you're
Yes,
dedicated
yes,
and they
the
don't need to worry
constant
about you.
secret handshakes.
Gosh, yes. My gosh, I love that you just said that.
But, I mean, these are the markings of a cult, right? I hate to
Yes.
say that, but it's
It's
like
so
these
hard,
are
but
the
it
markings
is.
of a cult
Yes.
or at least a cult mindset
Right. And that you
of
have to bring someone back in or you can't you there's a fear of you. Okay, I'm not saying this right. There's a fear from the inside of people affecting you and pulling you away from the purity of the faith, right?
Mhm.
And there's this outward, like, I have to draw you in. And that's the only way we can
Yes.
be,
Yeah.
while not, like this, I have to draw you in while keeping away any of your values and your
Yes.
sensibilities,
Draw
right?
you in without
Right.
drawing you.
Right. Yeah. This
Yeah.
whole idea of like, what we need is actually unconditional acceptance, right? And
Mhm.
this system does not allow that, right? While
Yeah.
preaching that we are unconditionally loved and that that's what we're offering. Is not
Loved,
what they're
but
offering.
always loved, but.
Right. Yes.
And and this particular person is in a branch of Christianity that believes in the once saved, always saved, like you are
Mhm.
chosen, like
Right. So you
principle.
think they
And so
wouldn't have to be worried about you.
right. And it's got to be so messing with their
Mhm.
paradigm
Yep.
that I was once a devout believer and then I no longer am. Well, which is
Well, so
I'm saying
you're a
that
prodigal
as
child right now
yes.
instead of a
Yes, and
liberated one.
exactly.
You're
Yeah, and
in rebellion and
"I hope that
backsliding.
you come to know," and, like, my story is, and again, like, she named me as being no longer a Christian and falling away from the faith, but I have not named that for myself at this point in time.
Right,
I am still in the I don't know space, and that's okay. Like, I'm real
right.
cool with that. I'm totally fine just hanging out here
Yeah,
for as long as necessary,
yeah,
forever if that is what it is. And so I haven't named that for myself. So she just kind of put that on me as like,
right,
I am no longer a Christian. I've fallen away from the faith, which like we've never talked about
right,
that
right,
as far as I
right.
can
But I
recall.
mean, honestly, if you were a dedicated Christian in a progressive, like LGBTQ supporting church, would she think the same thing?
I'm super
You might have
curious.
used different language about it, but
Sure. Yeah. Cause I feel like I've been
I think they might have used the language like
pretty
you're not following scripture. Like, that's been the things put on
Yeah.
me, right? Like,
Yeah, like you're not fully dedicated
right.
to. Yeah, I'm super curious because I feel like I've been pretty careful because I am someone that, like, I don't think your religious affiliation is necessary for trauma recovery. I
Yeah.
think if like Jesus is helpful for you, great. If Jesus is not helpful for you, also great. If you are in the space of the unknown, awesome. That's a beautiful place to be. I don't think that it's and so I feel like I have been doing the best I can to kind of hold space for people where they land on that spectrum. So I've never come out and been like, "Oh, being a Christian is bad," and like being an evangelical is
Mhm.
bad. And so, but for some reason, and this has happened a couple times before with people who are not as close, they've just decided I'm not a Christian anymore.
Mhm.
And it's like,
Right.
I've never said that.
Right.
That is never, but it's
Right.
because, as you said earlier, I'm not following a specific brand of
Right.
Christianity,
Mhm.
which is this very evangelical, you know, the language, the secret language,
Right.
like I'm
Yes.
not, and honestly though, Catherine, I never spoke that language.
Yeah.
Like that was never, and like I would get interviewed like for church jobs, and I would always get interviewed in like city churches and stuff like that. And they would be like, one of the
Mhm.
things we really like about you is that you don't use Christianese. And I was just like, that
Mhm.
is intentional. Like,
Yeah.
I think this language is weird.
Yes.
Can we just speak like normal human beings?
Yes.
But I could
That was
default
one of
into,
my first deconstruction moments, actually, like, way back when, before I knew it was a deconstruction thing, was reading Papa's Prayer by Larry Crabb, who is, like, still, like, deeply evangelical, right?
okay.
As far as I know, like, at least that book is mired in that, but it was still like, "Can we talk to God like a regular human?"
Yes.
And that was really helpful to
Yes.
me. That was one of those,
Right.
like, moments of separating myself from the Christianese and being more real, you know?
Yes. Like,
Um,
just have a
right.
conversation.
Right, and
Let's
seeing God
not
as a
make this
shepherd
weird.
instead of the accuser and, like, the judge and, all of those little micro movements
Yes.
that led to,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
further things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, those
Yeah,
led
yeah.
to less anxiety, I would say feeling
Yeah,
closer to God at that point,
absolutely.
right? It wasn't until I was, like, deeply triggered from moving back to my hometown and,
Mhm.
like, hearing Christian music all the time and the type of Southern
Yeah.
Christianity that was around me that I grew up with that I was like, "Oh, I didn't know this was still triggering to me, but apparently it is once I'm around, like, this version of it again," and that's what
Yes.
led to the pulling on a thread that led to the
Absolutely.
unraveling.
Yeah,
Yep.
when your body is
My
like, "I
body.
don't
Yep.
feel good. I don't
Yep.
feel safe."
Yep.
Yeah, and that's one of the thing that's super important to me in the work that I do, that I feel like when someone, quote, unquote, "leaves the faith" because they've been abused, that folks sometimes look at them with this, like, posture of pity of like,
Mhm.
"Oh, they were hurt by the church."
Right.
And I just want it to be an acceptable position that if you leave, quote unquote, leave the faith because of abuse, that's a legitimate reason
Right.
to leave the faith.
Right.
That's a valid reason.
Right.
You don't have to explain
Right.
yourself.
But there's so much crazy teaching around suffering, right?
Yeah.
That's like, the suffering is supposed to make you stronger and bring you closer to Christ, and it's a test from
Mhm.
God, like, abuse isn't just abuse, it's all these
It's
other
true.
things, right?
Or they'll come at you with like, "Well, that wasn't God who did that.
Right.
It was bad
Exactly.
people.
Right.
That's not God."
Yeah.
But that's so invalidating,
Right.
especially like we're taught like the church and God are intricately interwoven.
Right.
And some people can make a separation, and that's helpful
Yeah.
for them to be like,
Yeah.
I have a personal relationship with God. The church is over here, and they
Mhm.
can have like carry on with
Yeah.
this, personal
Right.
relationship, and that's helpful. And a lot of people can't do that. Like they're
Right.
intertwined,
Right.
and that's not our fault if they're
Right.
intertwined. That's
And
reality.
I'm curious for you and what you've seen as a spiritual abuse coach, how much of the pain is internal from the teachings and the way the system is set up, and how much of it is like community abuses or these kind of
Yeah.
feelings of like you can't actually have a real friendship or things like that. Like I'm curious because I
Right.
know for me as an empathic neurodivergent person, I live so much more in my inner world than a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people do. And so for me, a lot of it was internal. Like the
Yeah.
people around me, I could tell they loved me. I could tell they wanted the best for me, but it was from this system, right? And all these teachings
Yeah.
that were creating so much desperation inside.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I just have so much curiosity around what it's like for people who are more in the external world, but have still been so rocked by this. Like, what are
Yeah.
the things that have hit them the hardest? Like I know purity culture has for a lot of people,
Sure.
like other
Yeah.
kind of abusive situations in the church. Like what have you seen or experienced for
Mm.
yourself that feels like some
Yeah.
of those other major things
Well,
that come
that's a
up
big
frequently?
curiosity, I think, because I feel like so much of the internal turmoil that someone faces as they start to do that deconstruction experience is, how is this going to impact other people? And
Yeah.
like, how is this going to impact relationships with other people?
Mm-hmm.
And if we take, I don't know what it would be like because I think they're just so interwoven. But if you could
Mm-hmm.
have that deconstruction process in a separate space where it's not impacting other people, I wonder if it would be easier. I don't know.
Well,
Um,
so I want to say I think it was for me because I had
okay.
separated myself from this version of Christianity. I was still in like conservative evangelical spaces, but they felt so different to me around Chicago that I
Mhm.
felt like I had more of myself and felt like I'd found my people, like people that
Yeah.
I was more aligned with and felt like I could unmask or just be more of myself. And I didn't have as much of
Mhm.
these Christianese.
Yeah.
Um, at least not the way that I was used to it. And so it felt really
Yeah.
different and it felt a lot freer. And so I did have space. And then I met my husband who's PCOSA. And I remember being like, I don't know if I can trust him. I don't know if he's okay. The first time we like
Sure.
the first time we met. And he's
Sure.
like, you were so quiet on our first date. It was like, because you were talking about like LGBTQ like relationships being acceptable. And I was like, I don't know
Yeah.
if that's okay. I hope that's okay. I don't know if that's okay. Like I was in that whole inner
Yeah.
thing in my mind, right? Of like
Absolutely.
the judging, the like, can I agree with this? Can I just listen? Can I be in conversation? All of those questions that like
Mhm.
doesn't happen for me anymore, thankfully. But so I was in a more progressive space then, like while I was doing the deconstruction, a place that was
That's
like
yeah. That's great.
all questions are okay. And like,
Mhm.
there's not a focus on your own personal piety and purity. It's more like
Mhm.
we're this community that wants to love and serve God. And it is more
Mhm.
like external service and learning and stuff that felt a
Yeah.
lot less pressure and was a nice container to do that in for me.
Yeah.
So it affected like my
Absolutely.
relationship with my parents, but like my own internal work wasn't as affected by it. And it wasn't immediate relationships. I was like
Sure. Did you have
distancing from.
geographic distance from people that you would have been worried about relationships?
I think I just hadn't had any of those kind of relationships in a long time that would have had
Okay.
that kind of language because it was more the Southern Baptist ones that would have had that pushy kind of language. And the
Mhm.
friends I have that are even still in really pretty conservative evangelical circles from up north, when we do connect, like I'm always surprised at how little pressure there is or how much little stress there is. So I know there's such a different
Yeah.
version of it, like there,
Yeah.
although there's still like
Absolutely.
a lot of bullshit, like a lot of like problems and
Absolutely.
abuses and things like that.
Right. Right.
It
Yeah, and I
wasn't
think it's
personally as
so
triggering.
important, and I find it so wonderful. Like my favorite thing about deconstructing, or I don't know if we were talking about this on the
Yeah.
recording or
Yeah.
prior to the recording,
Oh
about
no.
just I'm not responsible for people.
Yes.
I am not. They can have their own beliefs. I can have my beliefs, and I love that. Like where you land on the religious spectrum post
Yep.
being abused in the
Yep.
context of church, that is
Yep.
up to you, your journey. It is your journey.
Right.
You get to decide.
Right.
And yes, sometimes trauma is making that decision for us. That's okay. Like,
Yep.
that is okay. If the
Yep.
reason why we have decided we don't want to be associated with this, faith anymore or go to institutional church or identify as a Christian is because we've been abused. That's a legitimate reason. That's
Right. That we can
okay.
trust people to know what's best for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
It's
like a
okay to
woman who
listen
is
to your
like,
body and your
I've
feelings. They're
been,
not going to lead you astray. They're going to help you.
yeah.
They're
And
your
like,
compass.
yeah, exactly. And it's like a woman who, was abused by men and just decides,
Mhm.
I don't want to date men. I don't want to get married. Cool. Like
Mhm.
she's not going to have a less thriving life because
Right.
she has made a decision that this isn't
Right.
for her
Right.
for whatever reason. Like we're
Right.
not like, oh, you just need to, I mean, yes, some people do that. You just need to find an actually safe person. Like you just need to
Not
find out
you.
that not everyone is like that. Okay,
Right.
sure.
Right.
But if your sense of safety is best alone and not joined in a romantic partnership to
Mhm.
somebody or whatever equivalent of that is,
Right.
that's okay. Like
Right.
there's not something wrong with you
Yes.
to
There's so much
make a
less pressure and
decision.
judgment and
Yeah.
guilt and
Yeah.
all the things. Yes.
Have your own journey.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious if there's anything else you've noticed, particularly about what people in general need um, to thrive, and like maybe ways that that's um, obstructed in spiritually abusive situations, and ways that, like you're saying, like I'm not responsible for other people, like self-determination, autonomy, and like those kind of things are so helpful. And those are like
Mhm.
human needs. I'm just curious if we can name some of those needs or if there's other things you're seeing around
Specifically
that.
for what do you need to thrive?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think
Like
that
what, or even the fruit of the deconstruction that you've seen, or the like, what has really lit people up or been this biggest source of relief, right?
yeah. No, and I think that's such an important conversation because there's so much grief
Yes.
in the deconstruction spot
Right.
process.
And grief is medicine.
Yeah.
And it's not medicine that we're allowed to have in like, so there's like a lifetime worth of grief because we're not allowed to
Mhm.
have that in these religious systems, right? You're supposed to just trust
Mhm.
God and pray. And if you
Mhm.
feel any sadness or any anxiety, that means you did something wrong. You got to fix it. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of hiding and fixing and fear instead of the freedom to grieve and just let be, kind of like
Yeah.
the freedom to not be responsible for people.
Yes.
Yes. Like, so
Yeah,
even that is
absolutely.
a gift and also like really hard, right? That there's so much grief
Right.
and so much sadness, like of a lifetime to let out. And anger often. Anger
Yes.
is often not allowed, at least for women.
Yep. Yeah.
Learning how to use
Yeah.
your
And I'm
voice.
thinking of like specifically the thriving aspect, and we're about to talk about Inside Out on the Trauma Pop Culture podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but this is a spoiler, so hit the button of 30 or 40% more before if you don't want the spoiler. But at the end, when her little emotions are like hugging
Yes.
her true self, and they're like
Oh
all like loving her and like so she's like loving
my gosh.
herself
I'm getting goosebumps.
and
Yes.
like, yeah, it was just like, I mean, I definitely started crying. And it was like, I think
Mm-hmm.
that is something that we're just not allowed to do within these high control religious spaces
No.
either. We're not
Right.
allowed to just fully accept ourselves because everything is outsourced. We have
Right.
to get advice from other people. We have to get
Yeah.
validation from other people. And I love the idea that now like my relationships are healthy and mutual, not
Right.
enmeshed,
Right.
and we're
Yes.
just
Everything
taught to
was
have these
enmeshed. I'm
such
curious, like,
yeah,
what that experience was like for you. Cause yeah,
the
it's so
enmeshed
about with grief.
experience.
Yes. It was
The
like
enmeshed
enmeshed with God,
experience.
enmeshed with everybody. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I can take just the most recent example, friendship breakup, and I about a year and a half ago, I think, we had a conversation where we had this conversation on the phone and I said something and it was what I said as something as an aside and it was about sex. And I guess I indicated, I don't remember fully, but I indicated something about like sex is like people can make their own choices about sex.
Mm.
And she comes back at me with, no, the Bible is clear that sex is only for
Mhm.
marriage. And it was what she said was very much like outside of the conversation that we were having. So I didn't say
Right.
anything at the moment. But then I called her back a couple of days later and I was just like, that statement, the Bible is clear. I just need you to know how that lands for me. And we had this
Mhm.
conversation that I thought ended really well. We didn't agree, but it ended well in what I thought ended well.
Mhm.
Um, which was for me, it was like we're kind of been defaulting to your fundamentalist belief system. And I just need you to know that my belief system is in the room too. And like, I'm
Mm.
not going to default to you anymore.
Right.
And I think me defaulting to her belief system was a sign of enmeshment. Like I
Mm.
couldn't bring my full self into the space.
Right,
And
absolutely. Well,
and
she doesn't even
so
have her full self there. All she has is her belief system.
you're so right. You're so right. Yeah, so just to like, okay, I matter too in this space and
Mhm.
my mattering is just as equal to your mattering and we both matter. We have a mutual mattering happening
Yes.
right now. And I think that that is the opposite of enmeshment when like
Yeah.
both of our belief systems are in the room and we both equally value the other person's belief system, but then we also have our own and
Yes.
they don't have to be the same. And it sounds really hard, but I don't think it has to be hard.
No, it's just
Like,
so unfamiliar, right?
yeah.
When you've grown up with the other way until you practiced it and experienced
Yeah.
it and learned it. Yeah.
Yeah. And you
I
kind of
think
do. You kind of have to practice it and
right.
experience it.
Like I'm
Yeah.
still trying to figure that out in my partnership, even with a partner that didn't grow up with that,
Hmm.
right? Like what is pleasing, people pleasing, accommodating, what is like actually working through stuff where we each have a voice, right?
Hmm.
Like, and that I think because people pleasing is so similar to that and like hiding your own views, right? That
Yeah.
we're still learning that because neither of us had learned that
Hmm.
really. I just
Yeah.
learned to be like accommodating. Um,
Yeah.
and so like, oh wow, it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be threatening to both have a perspective that's different. And like, you're not
Right.
going to hurt the other person by existing with a different
Hmm.
like perspective on something or a different need. Like it
Yeah.
feels
It's kind of like,
revolutionary.
it does. And we're like little children. We're like learning
Yeah,
how to do this. This is a
right.
skill. And we give ourselves as much compassion as possible when it's challenging and
Yeah,
we make mistakes and
yeah,
we run over each other. And it's sometimes relationships end or distance is
yeah.
created
Right,
because we just
right,
can't do it or
right,
they can't do it.
right,
And like that's okay. We haven't failed at some
right,
arbitrary faith test
right.
because okay, this relationship didn't work out.
Well, I mean, that even to me feels like the way that in our capitalist colonial society, we feel like we have to control everything, right? So we have to control our
Mhm.
relationships, we have to control our thoughts, we have to control our words, we have to control our behaviors, we have to control the people around us. Um, and the idea of not doing that is so
Mhm.
crazy, right? So
Yeah.
that whole like holding on, right, versus like
Mhm.
being, right?
Yeah.
That I think makes it even harder to like it feels like a big like a death almost, right? Like the friendship breakup
Sure.
or the whatever, right? That like there's like this person
Mhm.
is dead to me almost instead of like I can release this relationship and it can be
Mhm.
whatever it needs to be for however long it needs to be, right? Which feels very
Yeah.
different and just a much lighter touch in relationships. And then I think it often doesn't have to feel like such a big breakup, right?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
right? It can
Absolutely.
still be
Yeah.
like painful, but it can be like, okay,
Exactly.
we mutually understand that we're in different places or we can't like
Exactly.
get along or it just doesn't make
Yeah.
sense to communicate as much as we used to or whatnot.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm curious with this friendship breakup that I just went through, like there is a sense of I value myself. I value my beliefs. I value my journey. I value who I am. I love who I am. And it's not worth it to me to sacrifice that
Right.
to remain in some kind of,
Right.
pseudo friendship with someone who
Right.
can't fully accept me. And
Versus like
so,
in that framework, she's probably thinking, I'm supposed to sacrifice myself,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, like I
In
don't
order
actually
to help
like
Catherine get back into the
Catherine.
fold.
Yeah, I don't actually enjoy being around Catherine, but I
Right.
need to sacrifice and like
And so
be
we
with
don't know if that's what
her.
she was thinking, right? We
I
can't
have
speak
no
for her,
idea,
but that's,
but
yeah, a common
yeah, but
thing, right?
it kind of felt that way, honestly, a little bit of
Yeah.
like she was doing me some big favor by being friends with me. And I'm like,
Right.
eh,
So
that's not friendship.
that makes me think of the consent and closeness matrix I created to
Mhm.
try to express and like have some framework around this. And hopefully I can put it in the video or I'll link to it up here.
Sure.
But this idea of it feels so paternalistic that, right? Like that pity, the
Mhm.
paternalism, the like, I'm here to help you, right? The white savior mentality, like all of those kind of
Mhm.
things. That's like, that's the warm, loving version of this version of Christianity, right? Which
Yes.
is like the
Yes.
blind
And they
side,
think
right?
that they are loving you. They
Right.
think that they are loving
Yes,
you.
absolutely. That
Yes.
equals love. I'm here to help you,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And even if you're like doing all the right things they think, it's still like, I'm here to hold you accountable. I'm here to like,
Mhm.
keep, all of those kind of things. You can't just appreciate and enjoy your friendship. Okay, so underneath
Mhm.
that is I still know what's best for you, but I'm going to do it in a less warm, maybe more harsh or just authoritarian way.
Mhm.
Like it's more about respect. It's more about like that kind of traditional authoritarian parenting style or
Mhm.
government style or whatever kind of place you're in, right?
Yeah.
Community. And then on the other side of the middle of the matrix is I trust you to know what's best for you. And the
Yeah.
warmer side of that or the closer side is like this acceptance. And
Mhm.
the one that has more space is the autonomy, right? So like you can move up and down depending on like where and how much
Mhm.
space you need in each relationship. Like you're allowed to have whatever kind of boundaries you need or spaciousness for yourself.
Mhm.
Um, and you can feel the warmth and feel space and feel autonomy and acceptance ideally. But
Mhm.
that was to try to say like some people feel better with like boundaries that are wider and some people feel better with like relationships that are closer, right? And boundaries that are
Mhm.
closer or different, but it's all like we trust each other to know what's best for each other and we're just here in like
Mhm.
self and other discovery and like enjoying each other and that kind of thing,
Mhm.
that's this
Yeah.
very can feel a very subtle difference, but you can feel it.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Thanks.
Um, I am watching our time. I
Yeah,
did
so how
move
about
a
if we wrap up
meeting.
this one
Okay.
and we're gonna
Go back
move
to
to the
the
next
other
one.
one.
So, everybody on this podcast, thank you so much for being here. And please tune in to the Trauma and Pop Culture, where we'll be talking about Inside Out 2.
Inside Out 2, come hang out with us.
Woo! And we will see you there. Bye, Catherine.